feels like a long walk. Good morning, everybody. So I suppose, before I get into the meat of the day, I ought to do the thing about fire exits, shouldn't I? Because that's a sensible thing. Apparently there's no expected practice sessions. If there's alarm, this door, or back where you came. That's it for the health and safety element. This is why I don't work in airlines. So for today, I've got the good fortune of obviously opening it up, but we're also going to go straight into the panel show with my fellow colleagues. So we'll sit up here and we're going to do a Q&A session. Hopefully you would have seen what that was relating to. It's all things in very simple terms about marketers spend ages getting marketing budgets approved, and then within what seems like minutes or weeks, everyone else is snatching, grabbing, digging, stealing, and using it like some sort of slush fund. So fundamentally, and we are going to open up questions, this is a sort of interactive session. And what I would say about the day is do throw yourself into it. Please don't go home thinking, I wish someone had asked that question. Be provocative. We only have an opinion. It doesn't mean we're right. It doesn't mean we're wrong. It's just a view. And likewise, we'd like to really get this going so we get some real stimulus going. So please do get involved. And I will be sort of throwing questions in as we go. Or if you have a specific question and we've not yet raised it, do throw it into that session that we're in this morning. So what I'd like to do is, just before I bring the guests on, well done for those that stayed at the hotel last night and made their walk here, because I think it's the longest route ever between hotel and this venue. I think Uber are going to set up some sort of track between the two venues, and it's particularly difficult last night when you can't see where you're walking. But we do think and do hope you have a really good day in terms of learning, insights and thought provokers, something that gives you a real stimulus to go back to at work. Really good opportunity for informal networking with each other. I mean, I wouldn't say if your employers were here, but actually it's really great to find out other people's contact networks, because there could be something that opens up your horizons in the future. So do grab advantage of that. That is, by the way, just what goes on in a room stays in a room. Don't quote me on that officially. And thirdly, obviously, you've got your informal discussions with potential partners, which could be a stimulus for future. So inside of me, just in terms of my perspective, you've got a brief profile of me. My background before I introduce the groups is largely automotive. So I was CMO for Europe for Nissan in Paris, looking after the European functions, all through the line, all media, as well as then the UEFA Champions League that we sponsored. And then on top of that, all the events. So from motor shows through to launches, through to R&D. And that was kind of a global platform, albeit European focus. Prior to that, was at Honda doing the same. And before that business, set up online retail for Honda, set up business outside of franchise, effectively selling sexy lawnmowers to B&Q. Obviously, someone has to do it, but it was a brand new business venture. So for me, that's been exciting. My background has been sales, as well as PR, as well as more latterly comms. So it's quite diverse in terms of B2B as well as B2C. But I'm no expert, but I do have a view, and hopefully you too will have those same views. So what I'd love to do now is, without further ado, is if I can invite the guests up all together. And you might have seen from your profile, I can probably move away from this now, I think, and sit down. We're going to sit in these. We don't know, we've not tried these. If it starts dip, oh, it's okay.
In the row, I'm next to you.
It's all right. So, Vivian, Head of Emerging Platforms, Next Generation Products at BAT, otherwise known as British American Tobacco.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vivian Csertus. Let me explain what it is, because I think I talked with a lot of you yesterday and today about British American Tobacco, and obviously what comes to your mind is cigarettes immediately, right? So we are not working on cigarettes. What we are trying to do is trying to find the next growth platform for this company. We all agree that tobacco companies need a significant transformation, and basically what we are working on, my team and several other teams, is trying to find the next big thing for the company. So we're going to have an innovation session in the afternoon that I talk more about it. My background is P&G, so I think for this session, I think I'm going to have quite good insights on P&G on how to cut budgets. Because that's an everyday thing that we are doing there.
Perfect. Right, and so now moving on to Stephen Davis, who's CMO of Kiwi.com.
Good morning.
Prior to that, you were with American Airlines and significant roles.
Yep. Ran the international marketing teams at American Airlines over 5 years. So all over the world, had teams in Asia, Latin America, Europe, and then most recently Dallas. I was asked to move to Dallas, didn't quite work out with family commitments, and so looked for a new opportunity. I'm now CMO at Kiwi.com. Many of you may not have heard of the business. We're an online flight search website and app. I think we can claim fastest growing, world's fastest growing. You've got to have a claim somewhere, right? We effectively connect the unconnected. So airlines that don't cooperate with each other, don't talk to each other traditionally, we connect them and serve you at one itinerary. So big change from a 100,000 strong organisation to one that's about 1,500 in size in terms of employees, but some new challenges.
Great. And last but not least, Sarah Lynn,
Yes.
Global Marketing Director for Intertech.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm with Intertech. If you haven't heard of the company, we are a third-party quality assurance company. So it's a combination of things. I work primarily in the products group, which is we work with manufacturers to basically get their products access to all the markets they want. So through required safety certifications, energy efficiency, all these sorts of things. And then we also manage risk for the companies as well. So if something is, third-party assessed, you can say, it's been objectively tested and things. But one of our primary drivers is really helping global companies understand the requirements for all the global markets and get their products out to more markets seamlessly. So that's what we do with a lot of manufacturers.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to get stuck into it now. So hopefully provocative. This is, these are the rules where we don't actually, anything that's said in the room does actually stay in the room. And obviously I think there are probably some sensibilities or difficulties of some areas of discussion. But for us to get to real answers, it's better to be really open with debate. But it does mean we should obviously not publicise this outside the room. But, so the crux of the question is, marketers spend forever and their teams trying to get agreements on budgets. And at the same time, it feels very quickly around the new financial year that other people are ready to dive in and attack it. Even if you've got a business where a head, like a VP or chairman, oversees both sales and marketing, somehow sales, it always drops in the lap of sales. What's going wrong? Or is that just the way things are? And I'll start with you.
You start with me, lovely, thank you. From FMCG industry perspective, because I think you guys are from another industry, so maybe that's helpful. I think there's a clear trend in that. And the reason for this clear trend on every year, we see P&G, Unilever, and other companies are decreasing budgets, especially on the marketing side and restructuring it, is because there is obviously the growth drivers that were there once are not there anymore. So all the developing market growth that we were expecting are not coming. The currencies are weaker. Obviously, we see that consumers are spending are weaker, the wages are not growing, and so on. And we also see that the consumers there's no such middle consumer group, a mass consumer group that you can put all your spending behind that's going to give you growth. So because of that, and obviously consumers, what they do is immediately they cut budgets and put that into the shareholders because still they would like to get the bottom line and pay the shareholder and increase the share price. But that also means that it's a downward spiral, and that's what we have seen in P&G case as well, right? Because obviously the more you take out of the business in marketing, in innovation, and obviously also on resources as consumers and employees as well, the more you're going to lose behind that, unless you find new growth platforms that you can invest behind it and you change it around. So I think that's a clear trend, at least on an FMCG level, and I think they just companies like P&G as well need to find a new way how to grow. And actually reinvest part of this money that they cut back into innovations or back into actually what can drive their growth further. Okay. So I do see that, and we actually had in P&G, it's almost like a bi-monthly practice, if you wish, to cut your budget. So that's a very meticulous exercise. So you are a master of this. You can become that, but that's unfortunately.
So a more provocative question then, and again, it's not necessarily to start with you, otherwise it would just be one-to-one and the two of you perspectives. If the budgeting process originally takes such a long time, I'll pose a question to you, takes such a long time to get, within no time at all it's been stripped away, and then you have to rebudget, as you say.
Yes.
Your life is spent ultimately creating paper plans that no one really believes. It's like going to, as we said last night, Savile Row, and you've got this beautiful fabric, and somebody wants a three-piece suit, and then they just come away clawing bits of cloth, and in the end they still want the same three-piece suit, but you can't do it. So you make up these plans. So does that mean you don't originally believe in the plan because you know it's going to be cut? Do you over-provide for it?
I think you have to learn to play the game, honestly, and I've worked in FMCG as well, same challenges as you've faced. You get to a point where you know that there's going to be budget cuts, and so you actually start your budget process knowing that you've got to aim high, right? And then
but is that
probably
bad?
Well, it is, but I think the other thing for me, I've spent the last 15 years probably in the travel industry, both airlines and Expedia as well. change is the only constant. And in fact, that was a quote from my senior VP of sales at American. You've got to understand that in an environment where you can't control environmental issues, you can't control weather incidents at the moment. You've got delays at Heathrow and Gatwick probably. You've definitely got weather phenomenon in the northern US. You never know when somebody's going to do something stupid and disrupt the whole industry. And therefore, how can you plan, a full year ahead? You've got to be able to look at quarterly plans, at monthly plans about how you recalibrate your planning, but do that and share that with your other commercial colleagues. That's been my approach.
There could, I suppose part of the challenge might be that you could end up just doing a lot of internal process, and ultimately it's not actually about the customer, about the business development, and even if things were stable, if they're declining, I understand, and you can't take into account all external factors, so you have to allow for that.
Yep.
But what if the business is constant, and still it goes in, there are short-term dips in certain product lines, and people use it like some sort of pot? Is that just specific to certain companies, or is it just the habit? Is it bad organisation by the hierarchy?
Well, I definitely don't work for a bad organization. I'll just say that, just in case anyone's listening. But I think your point you just made, where it's interesting, where you're sort of always spending your time, working on this budget piece and losing sight of the customer. I think right now we're actually trying to shift back to a balance of where we really are focusing a lot on internal alignment and bringing in our financial partners and even our human resource partners to really address this issue. Because, we've gone, like everybody else, we go through a budget cutting exercise. We're a very large organization with 1,000 sites in 100 countries, and all those are managed locally. And each country or site manager has the authority to do their budget in their own way. And what we saw in the past 2 years is that marketing was cut. All these local marketing people we depended on. And so a lot of there was the expectation that there was someone else somewhere that would pick up that work without an understanding of what that was. So we are really refocusing and getting everyone on the same page so that everyone from human resources to the CFO has an idea of what it means to build up the pipeline, right? Because the problem there is they cut marketing, they didn't see an immediate problem, so it must have been fine, right? So that's the problem, is you don't see it when you have people are managing. A lot of our operational testing facilities are managed at a 30-day cycle, right? So they're not great at thinking long-term, and they weren't understanding the long-term impact. So what we're really trying to do now, and it's something I struggled with a bit at first, because it's not the fun part of your job. I'm finding a way to make it fun and see it as an opportunity, but it's going to be a very heavy time of internal communications and data and analytics, and really getting everyone back on the same page so that we can go back out and be back engaged with the customers, but really to get everyone to understand what these timelines look like, how marketing works in building the funnel, how long that may take depending on industry and things like that, and having everyone have that agreement so everyone understands really what they're doing when they're making these decisions. So
I think that's a really interesting point. I think one of the challenges potentially, and we'll come at this way, is if you've got a senior director that says, yeah, I get all that, I get the longevity, I understand the model, I understand how it works. If you cut R&D today, you don't realise till 3 years later. Mm-hmm. If you cut brand today, it doesn't just drop. Likewise, if you invest, it doesn't just spike. The challenge is those people might go, yeah, but I've got shareholders, I've got short-term sales, I've got volume and bottom line, and actually I might change jobs. So why do I give a shit about the next 3 years? Pardon my French. By the way, working in Paris, English-speaking office, I swore once, and I said, oh, pardon my French. They said, sorry. I went, do you not have the saying where you go, pardon my English? They went, Martin, we do not understand. I went, let's move on with the agenda. So anyway, back in the room, we're back in the room. These people go, that's fine, but what do I care? I get it, but I might not be in the job by then.
And I guess this is on us to know what are the key priorities, how you plan this, right? Because eventually you know exactly within your portfolio which is the elements that you want to support and which you can drop. You know which is the portfolio there, where are the consumers in the CDF, consumer development funnel. Are they more in the awareness consideration because you're a new brand, or you're an established brand that can afford, if you wish, to be taken out of awareness and support for some time? And also, you also know your competitive environment. So is it you're in an industry or in that category where you are heavily advertised, so that you should not put the support. So you make your choices from the beginning of budget planning based on all this kind of criteria, and then you draw the line. But it's very important when that budget cut comes that you realign your targets, right? So that's one thing that you get the budget cut, but then you go back and say, all right, so in case you cut this is the volume that you're gonna lose with that. And we have all sort of marketing mix modeling researches and resources to say how much that means. Now, it's not accurate, right? We all know that, because obviously if you're doing it for a long time, it's just multiplying, and the model doesn't take that into account, that for like you 2 year, 3 year on, it's gonna have a multiple effect. Now, what you do is obviously you plan additional activities or you influence people around you, because you're not the only one who wants to develop this project, right? There is an end market who wants to develop that project. So you try to negotiate with the end market to save some cost, your R&D team to save some cost. So you kind of split these things around in your team and around in the key influencers to say, how can we still deliver without that budget available? What are the priorities? Or can we do something else that can have a higher impact? Are we missing something in the portfolio, in the pricing, in the innovation, in the packaging, in the communication, how we can be more effective to actually deliver all this? So I think yes, but you anyway start from a very prioritized mindset from the day one, because we know it's gonna come. So you anyway know what's your priorities and how much you deliver at each level. And if it gets cuts, you realign the targets and you hope you made it right, which is a prediction. Obviously.
I get that, and that's entirely logical. But have you ever worked, or anyone worked for a business, but very briefly, I don't mean worked in the business briefly, where they say, well, I know there's a cut coming, but your job is to make it still work. So don't give me a logic that says budget down, KPIs down.
Yes, and this is the influencing part.
How do you
so this was the influencing part. It's a very good example. My R&D team really wanted to launch a product. I arrived to the company and they told me, well, now that it's a good idea, but we never planned in the budget. So great news, you can launch it in 2 months, but we don't have budget for it. Good luck with that. So what you do is, and that actually happened, I arrived to BAT with that. And then what happened is R&D team said, okay, we give you some money, start working on the packaging so we can start working on this idea. Then I went to the end market and said, oh, lovely. This is when you don't have a little table next to yourself. That's okay.
This is, have we got a...
It's okay, don't worry.
I thought you were going to take the tablecloth.
No,
I was just going to see one of those.
No, don't do it, it's okay. So basically...
Charles, thank God you didn't go like that. Or to your right, you could have gone to your left.
So basically, you are asked for different influencers around you for other brands. So you look for resources for where it's the resources, to end market, to region, to other places where actually has the resources can help you out. And every little counts in these cases, right? So those are the ways you can actually help to deliver those. Or you don't deliver it fully, you deliver just part, but the most crucial part, and delay some parts.
Okay.
So obviously there is a few ways how you can handle these situations.
And is that the same for you guys, or do you get the expectation of you live with the cut and still make it work?
The key thing is to align on commercial objectives to begin with. And so, in my experience, the discussion has to come up of okay, do we expect to have an effective product launch, or in airlines it's often a route launch? Do we expect to be as successful without the marketing support? Honestly, if we don't tell people about the product or the service that's new, by way of advertising and marketing communications in general, because we've just gone through a budget cut, then how do we expect to actually achieve those commercial results? It's not just about personal selling. As good as some salespeople are, they need some aerial support, if you like, to be able to do the job. And so I think it has to be a very honest discussion about, well, it's not just an exercise in cutting budget. There are going to be repercussions. And I think, when you talked earlier about, maybe the impact of turning off brand marketing activity, you don't see a dip in that for months. We went through an exercise at Expedia back in 2008, when there was a financial downturn, and we stopped all advertising spend, apart from very basic search. And it took 6 months, and gradually you saw all the metrics dip, and we were measuring absolutely everything. The great thing about going through that exercise, I wouldn't do it, it's not for the faint-hearted, so I wouldn't recommend it, but we actually got then to a zero-based budgeting point, where when we started doing branded search, we started doing display advertising, we started going back on TV, we could measure the uplift. And then we built a fairly sophisticated econometric model to look at that over a longer term, and could predict with a fair degree of accuracy the impact of various marketing comms channels.
Okay.
So.
I'm going to ask the group if there's any specific questions in a moment, but after the one I've just asked. It gives you a bit more time. So please don't leave us in this kind of tumbleweed moment. But if you had, people often ask, who's the biggest enemy of marketing? But then equally, I mean, if you were summarising that, who would that be? And equally, who's the strong, based on your history, the strongest advocate of marketing that you've won round, and it's really been a game changer in the business?
Yeah, for me, I think it's been interesting because it sort of pairs up with your last question of, you know, what have you done? Who has maybe picked up budget? So we've had, you know, by necessity, we've had to develop some new partners where we had to go to maybe a certain country or business line, and we said, you know, the budgets are cut. We can no longer support what we had planned. And they said, well, we believe in it so much, we will fund it out of our operational budget. And this was very successful in some areas and less successful in others, because when there wasn't someone on the ground to manage that, you know, we had some things that ended up being brand risk. When you just have people who don't work in marketing deciding, you know, to put a logo up for a sponsorship at an event that's quite controversial. You know, some membership organizations have interesting ideas, especially in the US right now. So it was, you know, suddenly someone's up, you know, talking about climate change denial with our logo behind them. And so it was a good wake-up call for everyone to say, you know, maybe not everybody can do marketing, you know, or, you know, is going to understand all the implications of it. But it was also great for us because some of those partnerships, you know, having some of those people say, we believe in this so much that we're going to fund it. So we, you know, we took that energy of saying, you know, let's take this partnership beyond a logo on a wall at a terrible event and move that into something more if you believe in the power of marketing in your industry. So we've had a few of those great partnerships and used those as test cases where actually even one site is actually willing to fund marketing, and then we can take those examples and what worked, and we're trying to really, you know, share those internally almost as case studies with the rest of these sites who have maybe done the cuts. So we've had some unexpected partners, and in some cases it was, you know, a true test of everything that brought us closer together.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Has anyone got any question, any burning question I keep looking at you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well, I'm not even not prepared, so whatever comes to my mind. First thing that I hear is that we, as marketeers, victimize ourselves sometimes, saying that someone else is cutting our budget. In reality, my personal feeling is that we are partners in crime. We have to decide together with the P&L owners if things make sense to cut. Now, if I have to convert that into question, I would say, do we believe that we manage our stakeholders, and do we explain well enough to our stakeholders what the return on investment is of the A&P that we spend? And do they or do we together make decisions to cut A&P, understanding all the consequences? So I would leave it at that.
I think this reminds me, you know, the issue of, are we doing a good enough job communicating? So I just heard an interview with the president of Harvard where she said one of the biggest transitions from coming from, you know, her work to being in leadership was the idea that instead of always having something new to say, part of her job was repeating herself over and over. And I identify that with that so much because, you know, coming up through marketing is supposed to be new, innovative, exciting, and I think it has probably taken me a while to mature and realize that unless I am constantly repeating the same things over and over, you know, it's not going to be heard. And so I think that's the, you know, I take ownership for that of if the organization doesn't understand the value and doesn't understand the impact, you know, we are communicators, you know, it's really on us to do that. And so that it's been a bit of a personal struggle, or personal growth for me to realize that part of my job is not always saying something new. It's saying the same thing over and over.
I mean, I think working with finance is a key thing to get right. It goes back to that whole idea of aligning on commercial objectives. And your CFO can either be your worst friend or your best enemy, if that's the right way around. And equally, you know, finance are very good at coming up with their ideas on your tagline or, you know, where your brand logo may be placed. And it's very difficult as a marketeer to look at their pivot tables and critique them. But I think there does need to be more of that shared responsibility, to your point, absolutely.
And I do think that I think you mentioned ownership about that, and you need to demonstrate that you have the expertise of what you're doing, and you know how that it's important for the company to make the most effective and highest return on investment on everything that you do. Great example on that is we see a lot on agency spending, that we just spend an enormous amount of agency, which is non-workable assets because consumer never see the agency spent as such, right? And we are thinking, well, maybe we should tackle differently. Maybe we should start open sourcing agencies, so agencies get used to bidding more versus creating partnerships and invest long run, and maybe we can get out cheaper. So all these solutions that you come up with that looks like a better resources, better managing resources. You get better creatives, you get better people, more diverse resources as well in a better budget that can help to organize it and to show that you're owning this process and you're not just a victim of the process, as you said. Similarly, for digital marketing, in P&G 5 years ago, we literally were competing who spends more on digital. Okay, so every brand said, I spent 30%, now I said 50%, no, I'm 60%. Now, we didn't know if it actually has a return on investment. It was the trend, and we all fall into it. And by now, we figured out that this is wrong, because obviously we're not targeting the right consumers, it's not effective, we don't see, there is a 1.7 second people spends on Facebook ad. Great, so how is my effectiveness and branding going to help, and how are they going to understand the message? It doesn't get through. So what if we cut back digital? Because maybe, you know, we figured out that this is not the best way, and we reinvest TV, radio, e-commerce, or wherever else we think is driving the growth. And all these decisions that we are driving versus somebody else driving us to cut it, I think that shows the ownership and that we're not going to be the victim, as you said rightly.
Okay, great. Any other questions or any particular challenges? Yes.
My point of view, and then a quick question. Thanks for all your points, and I fully agree on two statements that have been made. One is about the short-term incentive, so you're saying in a French expression, which is completely true, and the second one about the victim of the budget that you already answered. My point is that since 2009, actually in the FMCG, I am working in a company that didn't change, that did maintain the original budget. It's just a matter of fact, it's a constant. The fact that as marketeer, we play in this battle, create a disconnection between management, between the company objective that are much more, always more financial than long-term, private equity shares. So there is a disconnection, always bigger. And the fact that we do not understand probably the business objective itself. So we are not even that considered in the equation. My question is, so this is a point of view, and my question is, you didn't mention ZBB, zero-based budgeting, which is now, for some company, the way you're working since a few years. One is Heinz, they made an offer to Unilever with the ZBB, some other private equity and public company are using ZBB. What is your point of view on this? Because it would be interesting to know if...
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone want to particularly start?
I've been using zero-based budgeting for years. I think you've got to be able to defend a business case for your marketing investment, and that does ladder up to the leadership team and being able to talk to your CFO or CEO. Where I am right now, working for a much smaller business, the budget was zero. Everything we do at Kiwi.com, and I know the Expedia guys are going to talk a little bit about this in the next session, is about proving cause and effect. And so I've got a job to do to demonstrate the value of marketing, full stop. So, and it's interesting in a travel technology business where the term marketing isn't really even understood. And so, you've got to say, okay, well, if we do this, we're going to get this back. And trust us to demonstrate to you over time the value of marketing. So for us right now, we're focusing on bottom of funnel activity where there's a direct ROI. and then sort of overshadowing that with some PR activity, which interestingly is one of the most least measurable aspects of marketing communications, unless you believe in AVE. And then you get the opportunity to do all the fun stuff and the really hard-working stuff in the middle. But yeah, it's based on zero-based budgeting.
Yeah, so we haven't always done that, or we haven't done it as long as other companies, but we launched a big rebrand and used that as an opportunity to really start from scratch and start from that zero-based approach. And I think one of the things we learned a lot through that was we had a lot of people in leadership who understood older methods, advertising, PR, things like that, and understood digital, but didn't really understand the value of content. And our content is very technical. It's not something we can outsource or buy. It really takes our marketing people working closely with our technical people. So the value of that, so we learned through this zero-based budgeting that the organization didn't understand the value of that and didn't really understand the value of thought leadership. And so it was a great exercise for us because we really learned that we had to, other areas they were willing to just accept. Advertising, great. But we were able to show that this is actually one of our most efficient drivers. It's actually really what our customers want, and it was the thing that was really the most undervalued by our leadership at the time. So it was a great exercise for us.
I think it's really great for end markets, or when you are launching a brand, or when you're doing you reach a business very close to KPI business objectives to reach those ones. I'm working on innovations, right? So in this case, my budget is something that's going to come to market 2, 3, sometimes 5 years from now. So it's very hard to actually say I'm going to be on a zero-based budget because then you're not going to get into the market in the next 5 years either. So it's really dependent on what your job content in this case is and how you deal the budget. In some cases, it's really great, and I'm sure it's a best practice. In my case, it would not be very, very, very effective to do so. But definitely, as we're moving on, even us is not doing full budget for the 5 years, right? So it's not a zero-based budget because you need to start with something. But at every learning and qualification stage, we prove how much this product going to deliver to the company and how much based on that investment and MPV in this case it's going to deliver, so it's worth to invest into it. It's not exactly zero base, but it does have stage gates to show that if we qualify this, if this is how much it delivers, then you invest into this further. So that's almost zero-based budgeting, if you wish, in an innovation way.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got about 5 more minutes. Is there any other, probably time for one more question from the group before I start to close up here. Any questions from the room that everyone really wants to ask? A burning question?
Do you guys use scenario-based thinking to look into the future, and quite taken by the cause and effect concept? So looking at how 5 years out an innovation may play out and how an innovation may actually shape a future. So using then media engagement to set the conditions for an innovation to be a success.
Definitely. So on one side, you obviously do the basic things like volume forecast scenarios, how much it's going to have a consumption effect, how much it's going to grow the category, how much it's going to take from what sorts of businesses and so on. So you can kind of have an idea with different scenarios on what it could deliver for you. And then obviously how you bring this to market, it depends on your consumer journey. So where is your consumer, who is your consumer, and what is that consumer, how going to interact with the product, how you can raise the awareness behind it. Essentially, when you are developing the product in the beginning of the stages, you just want to make sure that you have enough consumers who are interested in it, and they're going to use it for a sufficient consumption level, for a sufficient life time to actually generate the right profit margins that we are looking after. So I think it's more in that sense, scenario planning of the scenarios of how much business objectives we should set for this and how much we should invest behind it. But that's exactly that qualification gaze that help us to understand which scenario is actually coming to life. So we do a lot of, obviously, researches, a lot of marketing mix modeling, which I'm sure you're familiar, and to actually find the right mixes, and obviously with the right market, combine that.
Okay. Any other views or similar views?
I suppose a little bit of an opposite opinion, perhaps, is you can do all the market sizing and the analysis. I'm working at the moment for a entrepreneurial environment where the CEO would consistently say, just launch it. I mean, there's no forecasting or modelling, just get on with it. And you can, in our experience at Kiwi.com, we have made demand. You know, we've found a way of supplying a product that people didn't necessarily know they needed. We're trying to make travel easier for consumers overall. But there was no testing, there was no, you know, it was, right, we have a solution led by a technical solution, which we launched, and, you know, we're doing 9,000 bookings a day, so we're doing something right. It's still small compared with bigger players in the industry, but yeah, it's very different to, I think, working in a very established business like BAT, where you've got to fight for your innovations budget, and I've been there and launched new products, actually in a completely different category, but yeah, it just depends on the size of the business, where you are in terms of market maturity, business maturity, and so on.
Okay, thanks for that. Brief Neil.
I would say my business is much more boring than that, but I think what we are looking ahead to, you know, market disruptors and things like that, and in our industry, I think a lot of that is going to be coming potentially from data and from AI. So it's been great for us in terms of marketing and getting everyone on the same page. Just there's going to be a huge focus on data, and it has helped turn the organization to look at the data that, you know, we've been trying to convince them to look at, which is sort of our data pipeline and our funnel management and things like that, and look at, you know, not only, you know, insights we can pull out of that to justify marketing spend and things like that, but insights we can pull out to realize, you know, what our customers looking for, what are we missing, because we do see, I think, you know, for our industry, data will be a big disruptor, and the AI potential to make complex things simple, which is currently what we have a whole lot of people doing. So that's going to be a big disruptor for us that we're very much, you know, thinking about now and getting ready for, and realizing, you know, just that awareness of how much data we do have as a company and what we can do with it. So it's been very good for us. And the one point that where it's actually brought everyone together, and I think especially for public companies, it's been a great learning point for us. You know, so we have put together, it's, you know, sort of a marketing and sales operations and insights board with leadership. So, you know, the CFO is there. But one of the great things we did is we actually have someone from our investor relations team who's also on that. So he is living and breathing everything we're talking about in this world, and then also, you know, talking with the CEO about the investor relations portion. So he's actually become a great advocate for us and for that as well. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Thank you. So that's just about it. But on a complete tangent, before I close, I have to ask the question: if you weren't in marketing and you weren't in the job you're doing now, what else would that alter ego be doing?
Can we start from that side now?
What would I do if I wasn't in marketing? Architecture. That's what I'd be doing.
Okay.
It's a random one, but there it is.
For me, it would be, I'd be spending all my time on the water. I'm a massive sailor and never quite had the courage to be a professional sailor, but I've sort of dabbled it, so that would be what I'd be doing.
I think I would.
You'd be launching an orange
I
juice
would be
brand,
in.
wouldn't you? Just
I would be. Yes, sir. Check it up. Yeah. I would be in R&D. I think I'm really passionate about innovation. So that's the when you can actually create it, really, not just market it and brief it. I think that's a really beautiful thing to do.
Fantastic. Very sensible answers. Very thought through. No, not a juggler, not a clown. No. Okay. So that's it. That's it from us. I hope you enjoyed this session. Me.
Yes.
Do you know what? On a very I'd love to be a saxophone player in a band. That's a dream. Even if the band don't want me, I just want to be in the band. I love the idea of it, the romance of it. Thank you for your time. I hope it was of use. I think from now, it's the other end of the building, isn't it? So if you've not managed to go down for your network meeting yet, as explained, this is in two parts. You've got halfway down opposite reception are the two rooms where the workshops are. But the session you're going to now is right at the other end. So good luck. You might want to take some fluids with you, some solids, just in case you get stuck en route, because it's quite a walk. And will you have somebody pointing directions? That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you to panelists.